Hello, good people. It's Rob Lee. It's March 20th, 2019, and I've decided to redo a video that I did about a year ago and try to make it better and easier to understand. It goes hand in hand with two videos that I did about Jesus Christ, the hidden Jesus and is Jesus God. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at the dark forces that were waiting on Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago and what led up to it and how it came to be and how the same force is waiting on him now. And this is the force that is gathering all its power and all its hate to wage war on you and I and ready for the return of Jesus Christ. Genesis 3:14 and 15, the third page of the Bible, tells us in plain English, there is to be a seed of the serpent and a seed of the woman, and they will hate one another. And the demonic family that we live among is reality. Most cannot grasp this. Ephesians 6, verses 12 through 20 tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. Now these spirits are incredibly powerful. They drive and guide the evil beings in flesh form, and they prey on us when we are not protected. This is why it's so important that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. The spiritual world is very, very real. Let's go back in time, folks, and we're going to go back in time and we're going to look at something at what led up to Jesus Christ being where he had to be and why it had to be at that moment, at that time, at that place, because everything your Father does is perfection. And I want you to see what led up to this battle between Jesus Christ and the most evil force on this earth. Your Almighty Father loves you. He loves you more than I think most of us understand. However, when your Father gets angry, there's usually going to be punishment, whether it be individually or as a nation. Now, the kingdom of Israel is the nation formed from the descendants of a man named Jacob, who had his name changed to Israel, man ruling with God. All right. Following the death of Solomon, this kingdom was divided into a northern kingdom known as Israel and a southern kingdom known as Judah. Now, in the year 756 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians and removed from the land. Your father's patience had run out. The nation of Israel was filled with wickedness, and you can read this in 2 Kings. So the Almighty Father allowed the brutal Assyrian army to capture Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. The Assyrians, when they captured the capital city, they carried away the people, and they took them back to Assyria, and they were scattered around what we commonly refer to now in our day as the Euphrates River, what is modern-day Iraq. Now, some Israelites escaped to the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, after the fall of Samaria, it was repopulated with people from the regions around Babylon, and these people intermarried with those left in Israel and began a new mongrel race known as the Samaritans. The Samaritans were partly Israelites and a mixture of non-Israelites. Now, this new population brought into the land their own form of worship, including the demonic practice of passing children through the fire. 2 Kings 17:31. Their gods were manifestations of the Babylonian deity Moloch, whose sign is the six-pointed star, as the book of Amos 5 tells us and Acts 7 tells us plainly in the Holy Word. About 150 years later, Judah, in the south, known as the southern kingdom of Israel, was taken captive by the Babylonians. The people of Judah had rebelled against the Father, and we know our Father will punish his children, and sometimes very harshly. Judah had turned its back on the Father and rejected any attempt by those sent to call her back and to have her repent. Judah rejected it all. Now, as promised, the Father withdrew his protection from her, and when the Father takes his protection from you, you're done, man. You're easy prey. Whether you be an individual or a nation, when the Father takes his hands off of you, you're done, man. You really are. He had warned that if his people became faithless, that he would employ a pagan power to conquer and lead them back into captivity. Judah was arrogant. In fact, Judah went so far as to find their own false prophets to tell them that everything was fine. And they ridiculed the prophet Jeremiah. Imagine this. Jeremiah comes to them and he tells them what's going to happen. They laugh at him and they ridicule him. It was 70 years in exile before the tribe of Judah and Benjamin were permitted to go back home to rebuild their devastated cities. Now, it would be the Persians who allowed the rebuilding to begin by a remnant of what was left in Judah and Israel in 536 BC. Now, this was, of course, 70 years later, just as the prophet had said. The prophet said that after 70 years in captivity, some of you would be allowed to return home. Now, in the early 3rd century BC, Alexander, who they call the Great, I do not, but historians do, Alexander made his way through this same land, and there was a constant infighting among the devils for control of certain tracts of the land and control of the people. Nothing's changed. About the year 63 BC, the Romans under Pompey were to invade and subdue ancient Palestine. So until then, you have all these people, some good, many evil, all living together and infighting for control of what they call the temple and the land. So now we can add the Romans to this mix of peoples. Now this is the backdrop of what's waiting on the King of Kings. Because remember, Israel goes into Assyria, and what comes back with them? The demonic beings. Judah goes into Babylon. What comes back with them? Demonic beings. Okay, let's go forward. You see, every time our people have gone into bondage, certain people, beings, always followed them home and planted themselves with us. Are you with me? Eventually, these same beings are going to steal your identity because your father allowed it, and convince the world that you are the outsider and they are the insider. You see, from the very beginning to even 2,000 years ago, and now, the goal of the devil was to mingle his seed with the seed of the Father. These are the demonic offspring that Jesus Christ had to face, and they are the same sadistic monsters who have waged war on you since day one. This is going all the way back to Cain. This goes back to Genesis 3. This goes back to Genesis 6. Demonic families that live upon this earth that have waged war against you. All right? These monsters are doomed. Do you understand? They cannot be saved. They are doomed. It's been told. It's been written. They're done. So this is what is waiting on Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. Now you start to understand why Jesus Christ was born in this particular time, in this particular place. You see, this is what had to happen. Jesus Christ, from the time of his birth up until his death, they were seeking to murder him. He was always on trial through his ministry, and the forces of darkness were always trying to kill him. Remember, they tried to kill him from the time he was a baby. We read a short way into the Gospels before we find the first attempt to kill Jesus in Matthew chapter 2. We find that King Herod of Jerusalem attempted to trick the wise men into revealing the location of the child Jesus. Now, when your Almighty Father prevented this from happening, we see that Herod was so mad that he sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and the coast thereof from 2 years old and under in a vain attempt to kill the infant Jesus. I tell you this because this is the nature and the extreme lengths that the devil's children will go to so that you and I may be destroyed. It's important that you remember this. Don't you ever forget it. This is why I'm doing this video. I want you to see how sinister and evil your enemy is, because it reveals the true nature of the enemies of our Father and how serious this war is. This is not a damn game, folks. And his children, the devil's children, are playing for keeps. They have no choice. They have no choice. The land that Jesus Christ was born into, the land of Palestine, in the days of Jesus, was it was ruled by the Roman Empire, and it was ruled over by a governor named Pontius Pilate. He was the son of Caesar. He was born in Spain, and he was actually married to Caesar's daughter, and he had received his appointment in this land of Palestine. So now, as the governor of Jerusalem, Pilate had experienced trouble since he had been there because of the constant blackmailing attempts of the money masters from an island off the coast of Israel called Pergamos or Pergamum. And what these monsters were trying to do, they were trying to influence and control government and the church. Now, let me ask you something, folks. Does this sound familiar to you? Come on now, think. Your father said, nothing is new under the sun. So it was safe to say that Pontius Pilate was not too happy with this appointment or being in this province. It was hot, dry, dusty, and the beings around him were mostly demonic in nature. Now, the Babylonian money changers had gold from the conquest in ancient Babylonian days, and they had escaped before the rule of Medo-Persia. They were located on this little island called Pergamos. And if you go back to the book of Revelation, you will find that Pergamos was where Satan's seat was. Revelations 2, verses 12 through 14. So here is where the serpents, aka the money changers, set up their international finance headquarters. You see, the devil will always use finances to control the people. Finances and the spiritual beliefs. Now, from this little island, this is where these monsters manipulated empires because they had the gold. So, let's go forward. The reason that this is important, because I want you to understand why there was so much hate against Jesus Christ in Jerusalem. Because a mixed multitude of satanic children had coalesced around Jesus Christ. He was surrounded by evil, and a few of his own people had been scattered about, the lost sheep of Israel. Do you understand? Is this starting to make sense to you? All right. So let's go forward here now. I want to try to explain this to you. The goal of these monsters was to gain control of the temple. You see, just like now, to gain control of the church, you can control the people. They had to control the money, and they had to control the church, what they called the temple. Because the word church comes from the word ecclesia, which was to come later, which means to be called out, to be separated. Because we are to be separate from these people as much as we possibly can. Now, this is what your king was born into. He is surrounded by evil. He is surrounded by the same monsters that we are surrounded by, only they sought to murder him from the very beginning. On the day that Jesus Christ, of his betrayal and his murder, he was sleep deprived. He was tired. He was nervous and scared. Yes, Jesus Christ was afraid. Jesus Christ prayed to his Father for strength, and he went so far to ask, could he avoid this cup? From his birth until his death, Jesus Christ was setting the example for you and I to follow. That our will does not come before the will of our Father. Now, as the children of the kingdom, as the elect, as the flock of Jesus Christ, we must always seek to do our Father's will. And sometimes it's hard. And I know many of you are suffering now, and I'm right there with you. The pain that Jesus Christ endured was for you and I. It was for you and me, us. Jesus Christ was kidnapped. He was taken late at night, beaten, spat on, degraded. He was given a corrupt trial in the early morning hours where no one could see. They brought in false witnesses to testify against him. Now, after spending the night going before the Jewish authorities, he was brought before the Roman governor whom I just told you about, Pontius Pilate, who was afraid of Jesus. And he tried many times to set Jesus Christ free. But the Babylonians said, no, let his blood be upon us and our children. Pontius Pilate tried to have another man named Barabbas crucified in the place of Jesus. But the Babylonians said, no, we want Jesus Christ to die. Pontius Pilate was scared. Remember, Pontius Pilate knew Jesus was no ordinary man. Pontius Pilate had spies all up and down the coast of Israel. He knew Jesus was something different. Pontius Pilate's own wife, and it's recorded in the book of Matthew, had came to him and told him, leave this man alone, for I have had dreams about this man. Eventually, Pilate, out of fear, turned Jesus over to the Babylonians, but not before washing his hands of the blood of Jesus Christ. From the moment he was betrayed until his death, Jesus Christ was physically and emotionally abused. By the time they led him to his death, he had not slept for a day and a half. He was beaten. He was exhausted. He was beaten so profusely that the flesh was removed from his back. Our king was so severely beaten and exhausted that he did not have the strength to carry the tree that was used to crucify him on. He needed help to carry it because he had been beaten repeatedly all night and into the morning. You see, they liked to do it when no one could see. He had 6-inch spikes pounded into his wrists and ankles that were used to hold him up on the tree, only to die by suffocation. Now, many people believe Jesus Christ died from his wounds. That's not true. Jesus Christ suffocated to death. And I can hardly think of a worse pain and affright than to know that you can't breathe and you're going to suffocate slowly. Some devils made a crown of thorns and planted them firmly upon his head in the shape of a crown to mock him even more. And everyone who followed Jesus Christ that day were scared and helpless. And many followed from a distance, and others entirely left in fear of being killed themselves. Remember, Peter denied Jesus Christ. Everybody has deserted him except for a few women and a couple men. And as Jesus hung there on what I call a tree, people can call it a cross, people were laughing at him and mocking him. And they said, here is a supposed son of God, but he cannot save himself. The Babylonians mocked him, and they laughed at him. But it was the Roman soldiers who felt pain, remorse, and they became afraid too. You see, the Roman soldiers knew something's wrong here. They knew, surely this must be the Son of God. Jesus Christ bravely endured the pain, the fright, and even the doubt. He looked into the eyes of his mother, as he was being murdered. Slowly, Jesus Christ is starting to die. He's losing his breath. For Jesus to breathe, he would have to stand up on the spikes that were in his ankles. He was slowly being suffocated. This is why the soldiers would break the legs of the crucified people to speed up the death. Jesus Christ was thirsty, and it probably took all he had to ask for a drink of water. A soldier dipped a reed in a sponge of vinegar and attached it to a reed and put it to his mouth. The mockery continued right up until his final breath. The Gospel of Luke tells us that Jesus Christ spoke from the cross and asked the Father to forgive those who do not understand what they were doing, whom they were murdering. Jesus Christ was referring to the Roman soldiers and the Israelites who were under the spell of the Babylonian devils. It would be the equivalent of those in churches today who are under the spell of the Babylonian devils. He was not referring to the Pharisees. Before the Pharisees, these Babylonian monsters damn well knew exactly what they were doing, because they said, "Let his blood be upon us and our children." Eventually, Jesus Christ gave up his spirit and died. The Babylonians were not done. They were trying to pay guards to steal his body and lie about what happened. It never changes. Their father is the father of all lies. This is what your king was born into. This is what your king went through for us. Now, the Jesus that died and the Jesus that was resurrected is not the same as the Jesus that will be returning shortly. He is the Lion of Judah, and he is coming to kick ass and take names. Heads are going to roll and asses are going to burn. And this is the truth. And this is why these monsters hate you and they hate him. Because when he came last time, they put him up on a cross and they murdered him. This time, he's coming to do the same to them. May the Almighty Father bless you all in the name of Jesus Christ.